Hello, everyone. I'm Eli,
And I'm Preeti.
and this is Targum Tea, a podcast which focuses on pop culture reviews and social media. In today's episode, we will be talking about the new Disney Pixar movie Soul. Warning, this review contains spoilers.
Yeah.
So, a very brief synopsis of Soul. Soul focuses on a middle school band teacher and aspiring jazz pianist named Joe. He's voiced by Jamie Foxx. And he suddenly finds himself trapped between Earth and the afterlife in a place called the Great Before. He enlists the help of a soul in training named 22, who's voiced by Tina Fey, as he tries to find a way back to Earth and back to a job that he has that he's been dreaming of doing for his whole life, essentially.
Yeah.
So, give me your thoughts on this movie because I mean, I thought it was wonderful. You know, beginning to end, this was probably my favorite movie. At least my top three movie of 2020. Definitely, I thought it was
Oh yeah, it's
pretty
true. It's true. Same
pretty.
here. 2020's come out with movies that are pretty down here, but Soul kind of like topped them all.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I didn't even see like too many movies that came out from last year because obviously, you know, there was only so many that came out,
Hmm.
especially on streaming. But I
Yeah.
think this one was one of the best ones that I saw. I mean, getting right into it, this is probably like because Pixar has like a track record of being, you know, kids movies, obviously, but kids movies that adults can enjoy, that children can enjoy, that, you know, everyone can enjoy. This movie is literally about an existential crisis. Like
Yes,
that's pretty much the movie is about, you know, death essentially.
it is. Yeah.
It's a very grown up subject for a kids movie, and I mean I think it handled it like spectacularly. Like there's so much to like about this idea that they have with the Great Before and the Great Beyond. What did you think about kind of the world building that they do?
Oh yeah, same here. On like I watched this movie and like as soon as Joe died and he went into the line of like death, the thing where it's like taking them all toward like that bright light. I thought of like Coco because they both are kind of in they're both set in the afterlife or like some version of the afterlife. And I that was like the only thing that I thought was kind of like the same between them. But honestly, Soul is like really good just because like I think the one thing that stuck out to me about Soul was that this whole movie is kind of like about a second chance in some ways. So he dies and he comes back to life in some way. I mean, he becomes a cat, but so back to life. And I think he learns a lot more. And so then when he's actually inside his body in the end, he's able to appreciate, his life more.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying about this being like Coco. Just to kind of backtrack, this is Pixar's 23rd movie that they're releasing, and
No clue.
I was trying to think about, I was trying to compare this movie to other Pixar movies because I
Yeah.
love those like Pixar rankings of like, because it's just so hard to pick like the best ones because they're all just like amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I was trying to compare the subject matter of this movie to other Pixar movies, but it's like I think this might be the darkest that they've ever gone because Coco, you know, Coco is a movie about, you know, death, obviously. So I didn't think they could go any any darker than Coco. And then, you know, Inside Out, also a phenomenal movie, which was about the inside of, you know, someone's mind and their emotions, which was also very deep. In this movie, though, it's about Jamie Foxx's character who dies, obviously, and he has to find a spark and help 22 find a spark, essentially to find kind of the meaning of life. So what Pixar kind of created was a movie about, you know, finding the meaning of life. And I don't know, there's something just very humorous to me about, you know, a kids movie that tackles these kind of, you know, things that are going on.
Yeah.
And to me, what made the movie so much more poignant
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that it was released in a time when there's just so much terrible things that are going on,
Yeah.
you know, with coronavirus and, you know, everything with the election and everything.
Yeah.
Uh, just to have this movie, which feels like almost a glimmer of hope, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it just made me feel warm inside. Like, I don't know if it was that way with you, but it just
Oh
made me
yeah, no,
feel
no,
like
no, it's
warm.
true, it's true. I think like one of the best things about this whole movie was the whole theme on like what the spark was. Because this movie set up the spark to be like some sort of main goal like in life. So like when they find their spark, that's the one thing that they're really good at and they're probably going to do for like the rest of their life, or they're known for this thing on the side. And it turns out that like 22 Spark, who's like the soul in training, like what is she?
Yeah, the soul in training, pretty
Yeah,
much.
okay. Yeah. So she her spark is basically that she wants to live, right? It's not like she has a set thing, like she likes music or like she likes art. It's more like life in general. So I think her going to Earth and like seeing what life was like firsthand and like living in Joe's body for some time, that was like her spark. And I thought that was like a really cool thing to like bring on, that your spark isn't something that you're like really good at. So
Yeah, it's interesting. The whole thing about the spark is that, it's built around, these two characters, Jamie Foxx's character, Tina Fey's character. And, the whole movie is built around their relationship. And Joe, who's, his kind of fatal flaw in the movie is that he doesn't realize what he has, around him. And
mm-hmm.
he can't, he wants to be a jazz pianist. He's a middle school teacher and he doesn't, want to be that. But what he doesn't understand, it seems to be throughout the movie, is that there's so much to enjoy about life and he's not able to find those things because he hasn't attained his dreams yet. So and 22 is trying to find a reason that she wants to be a human, basically. That's kind of the whole thing in the beginning, is that she's like untrainable, is what they say, because she literally has been trained by, they list off like a whole bunch of people. It's like Karl Marx. I'm trying to remember the other ones. It's like,
I think Mary Antoinette, she was one of
yeah,
them.
Marie Antoinette.
Gandhi was one of
Yes,
them.
Gandhi. There's like a whole humor
The
sequence where
whole
it's
list.
like these philosophers who have
I
like
think it
tried
was
to teach her.
Einstein too, or something like that. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, exactly. And they're all trying to teach her like, to go to Earth and this is what it's like to have a soul. And she's just like this like cynical, I guess you would say person, or cynical soul
so yeah,
who doesn't want to go to Earth and become a person. And
yeah.
so there's this whole relationship that's built around, them finding a purpose through
Mm-hmm.
each other, essentially. Because 22 ultimately, even though she doesn't want to be a human, or says she doesn't want to be a human, by the end of it, we learn that she has, and she just hadn't found a reason yet. But that reason, was Joe. So it's just such a beautiful message,
Oh
in
yeah,
which I
true.
thought was great.
Definitely, yeah. And just to, like jump off your point there, 22, I think she's like she's a really funny, just due to the fact that her and Joe, they have uh they play off each other so like so well, that, and I think a lot of the humor kind of like lands in this movie, which is really good. So I personally like really like that, because like going back, like she's been trained by like so many people, and like we get to see a montage of sorts of like all these high five people, like them training her, and it turns out that she doesn't want to be trained, and we see them like give up, and it's just like that was so good. Like that part was so funny. I personally loved it. So
Yeah, I thought the humor was great in this.
yeah.
It's kind of like a weird balancing act sometimes with Pixar movies, because you have to be like funny for kids and like at the very least you have to be entertaining for adults. And I
Yeah.
think they strike that tone just so well in every Pixar movie, and I mean especially this one. I mean, there are some jokes that don't land, or at least didn't land for me, but the thing is, like, a lot of the jokes are made for kids,
Yeah.
so that's just the reality of what you're watching. But
Mhm.
I definitely want to touch upon, these layers of the movie created by really the incredible animation
Oh yeah.
that's in this movie. I remember talking to my parents about how Coco was probably the best animation that I've ever seen from a
Yeah.
Pixar movie, because that movie was just full of just incredible colors and visuals and everything.
Yep.
And then you get to Soul, and they create a whole universe, this whole great before and great beyond. and it's like, oh, it's borderline like trippy, like it's borderline like psychedelic to watch it, and all these like different shapes that they have. And what did you think
Mhm.
of the animation? Because I thought it was like, I thought it was brilliant.
Oh yeah, no. I think I think it's really good too. But to be honest, like I like Coco more than Soul just because I feel like I mean Soul was really good, but I feel like just because Coco had more color, it seemed like there was, more to see. And Soul was really good though, like on its own, just because as you said, they basically made a whole world, and that is not easy, you know what I mean? So, and they did it in such a way that it didn't seem like a ripoff of like anything else. It just seemed like their own world in Seoul. And I also think that the way that um that like jazz was shown in that movie was like really good. So like to like go off your point, like just like go off I think more, but like what do you think about how jazz was shown in this movie? Because a lot of this movie is about jazz. And
Yeah, oh my God. I was gonna, that was one of my points as well, is that there's this really great sequence. I think it happens early on and then later on in the movie. And it's something they describe in The Great Beyond. I believe it's called the zone, is what they describe
yeah,
it as. And it's when a person, is in the zone, they're really feeling what they're doing.
yeah,
And what happens in this moment is that Joe starts playing the piano and he feels, he gets inside the zone, and suddenly the lights cut out, and you see these close-up shots of him, uh, putting the keys in on his piano, and the music begins to come to life, and they show shots of his face, and it's just one of those incredible moments because it's a very intimate moment, and you start to understand that Joe really is this character who like cares so much about jazz, and it's just like such a sad thing that throughout the movie he can't see that even though jazz is his thing, it's not the only thing,
yeah,
obviously, for him. But you're right; those moments are just very tender, where you really get to see the music kind of come to life.
mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the same thing with Coco. Coco did a really great job at kind of bringing the music to life,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of making you feel the emotion of the song. And you're right; the same thing happens. The same thing happens in this as well, where you really, really, feel the emotion of the music. So
Yeah.
yeah, they did a great job with that. And it's jazz, and people forget that jazz kind of slaps. And then like there's a jazz movie that comes out like La La Land, and you're like, oh wait a minute, jazz is good, and
Yeah.
people don't realize it. And then this movie comes out with a really jazzy, cool soundtrack, and I mean that's another talking point. What'd you think of the soundtrack? Because I mean,
Honestly,
the
I
soundtrack
thought it was
was
actually pretty good. Like I've never been into jazz that much. Like I've watched La La Land, and that was like my only like mainstream like, oh, this is jazz.
yeah,
But this one was pretty good. Yeah. I actually like, and I like jazz more like after this movie. So it's really good. I think it really makes people appreciate jazz more because, as you said, it's like something that's kind of been slept on, and people are like, "Oh, it's just jazz," you know. But I think that this movie like really brings it into the forefront of like music. So
yeah, 100%. And I think that's also a good transition to something else that's really important, and, something that maybe has been overlooked about this movie, and that I believe I read this was the first black actor or main actor in a Pixar movie. And that's
really,
like it's kind of hard to believe when it's been 20,
really,
3
wait,
as
what?
before. Yeah, apparently that's true, that it's the first black main actor, or at least leading character in a Pixar movie. And one of the things that I really loved about this movie is that it's very much, rooted in culture. And clearly, there's a lot, about how Disney in the past has kind of had trouble incorporating diversity.
Yeah,
And I mean, there's a lot of things that Disney still has to work on. And, certainly Pixar as well has to work on. They've, started that transition in the last like 10 years. I would say it's gotten, a lot better.
oh yeah,
But they still have a lot to work on, clearly.
mm-hmm.
But they do a really good job at incorporating, this jazzy feel, a diverse cast to go along with it. So that's
Yeah.
something that's nice to see because, especially with Disney's checkered past, when you get a film that comes out where there is actually an attention to diversity, when there's an attention to, making it a movie filled with culture, that's nice to me. That's cool that they actually took the time to do that.
Oh, yeah, yeah, same. That's so true. And I think it was just, I think, really cool because also like as you mentioned, like we learn a lot more about like the kind of like way of jazz and like how Joe is like he's black, and so like how he sees the world, and like how his mom is honestly so funny. I really like his mom. And I also really like the fact that it shows that his mom kind of like only wants the best for him. Like when I watched this movie, like I got the point of view on which his mom was talking about too, because her whole stick was that Joe should be a teacher because like she comes from such a hard past. Her husband used to be a jazz player. I feel like I zoned out for this part, but
Yeah, he was a jazz player.
and
Yeah.
she and like her shop was the one that paid all the bills. And I think going off like seeing that she just wanted a stable life for her son, that was like something I'm like, okay, this sounds like something that I've heard too. But the fact that Joe like stood up to her and was like, this is what I want to do, it was like, well, like it's not something like I would do. So like
Yeah, you
who.
bring up a great point, honestly. It's interesting because I feel like, isn't that a theme in like, I mean, it's a theme in Coco as well, where it's like this idea between achieving your dreams, but like having them be realistic and
Yeah.
understanding that,
Mhm.
your family is a big part of you as well. Like,
Yes.
if I'm remembering it correctly, that's like a whole, idea. That is really the idea of Coco.
Oh, Coco,
Um,
yeah, true, true. It's the same thing, yeah.
where it's like the boy he wants to be this guitarist, and he loves music, but he also has his family that he
Yeah.
has
And
to.
his Nana, I think she doesn't like it or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, his nana doesn't like music. I can't remember exactly, but it seems to be a running theme, at least in these last two Pixar movies with Coco and Soul. And I don't know, there's something really nice about that too, because obviously, like we were saying, it's a lot of kids that watch this movie, and
Hmm.
sometimes when you see these movies that talk down to people, and it's like, go achieve your dreams no matter what, but then there's like this whole idea of go achieve your dreams, but like, uh, don't
Be
shun people.
realistic.
Yeah, be realistic and don't shun the people around you that you love just
Yeah.
to attain your dream.
Hmm.
um and I mean, that seems to be the thing with Joe, because Joe, he more than anything thinks that his spark, his reason is to live, is music.
Yeah.
uh but I mean, we see that it's really not. It's, that seems to be something that he loves, but it's not his, it's not necessarily, the spark and the purpose don't necessarily equal each other,
Yeah.
which they kind of make a point of at the end,
Thing
definitely.
in the end, yeah.
Yeah, I'm. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, no. Like it's the same thing here. But like what but like I watched this movie and I thought like Joe was really good at like being a middle school band teacher too, as well as playing being a jazz player. So I thought that he was going to go into teaching. I think I thought like that was how this movie was going to end. That he's going to become like, then he's going to say, oh, jazz is like a great part-time thing, but I'm going to go and become a middle school teacher because that's what I really like to do. Because through this whole movie, he was basically teaching 22, and I thought that would make him think, oh, I'm really good at it. But no, that's not how this movie turned out. So what do you think about him? In the end, he gets a a second chance, and so what do you think about his ending and like how the story ended?
I was going to say the ending is an interesting talking point. So that was one thing I was like confused about at the end, because so the way this movie ends, spoilers obviously, is that in the end Joe gets the second chance.
Mm-hmm.
He has to save 22, because 22, she goes into, I don't remember what they call it, I think the lost zone or something like that, where she feels like she doesn't have a purpose anymore. But Joe is able
Mhm.
to convince her that she does have a spark, she has a reason to live, and they also give him, the ability to come back to Earth. One thing that I was confused about is that they say that his spark is related to just the ability to look around him and see that there's beautiful things in his life and everything. I thought it was what they were hinting towards the whole movie is that it was about his teaching
I
and how he
know.
loves teaching and that's his spark. So were you confused about that at all?
I
Because
was a bit lost too because I feel like if that like if then like what's the point of having a spark? Because I mean I thought like the whole point of spark was that's the one thing that you're you're good at and like you're gonna do it or like you're not, but that's like the one thing that you end up really liking, and or even if you don't like, you're just good at it. So
right,
the fact that Joe Spark ends up being the fact that he can look around and he can like see life or something like that, like it's not bad, but it's just like what's the point of the spark? And I feel then that whole plot line kind of goes a bit downhill.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean I love this movie. Don't get me wrong. I think the last 10 minutes are the only part of it where I can see people not liking it as much, just because it does feel like it's going in a different direction, and then it kind of plays it safe a little bit at the end. There's this scene where he doesn't know if he can go back to Earth, and they basically are like, "No, here, we'll send you back to Earth. You can have your life essentially." I thought what they were going to go towards, and this is probably stupid of me because this would have been super super dark, but I thought it was going to be something where he sacrifices himself for 22, right? I thought that's what they were going towards, but like, and then I thought about this afterward, and I was like,
It's too
okay, wait,
dark for a Pixar movie.
yeah, I was thinking like, okay, so after the movie, the parents are gonna have to have like a discussion with their kids, like where the kids are asking, "Mommy, why doesn't Joe get to live in the end?" And then they're gonna have to explain, "Oh, well, he
Sometimes
sacrificed
people
himself
die.
for 22." So like, I completely understand why they didn't end it that way,
Yeah.
because I feel like they were probably in the writers' room and they were like, "How do we end this so that we're not making kids go home and like
Ask
cry?"
parents about death,
And
right?
like ask for, yeah, and have conversations with their parents about death essentially.
Yeah, but I mean, I think like the way that this movie was finished was actually pretty good in some ways. Like, yeah, the spark line kind of went a bit down, but I feel like the fact that he got a second chance, it kind of helped him in the end. Like you can see, like he's more happy with his life, like where he is, and he says like I'm gonna live like every moment to its fullest or something. That's like the line which this movie ends on. And I think giving him a second chance was really cool because I think that's what spoke to all the the grown up peoples in the room. Like, okay, like we're not gonna get a second chance if we die, like if we die, we're dead.
Right.
But I think like by Joe having a second chance, like we got to see like, oh, we should like really appreciate life for like what we have. Like, even though we want more, we should also enjoy the things that we have more or
a
like
hundred
have
percent
now. But yeah.
100%. I feel like the mark of any good movie is when you can say at the end of it that you at least learned something from it, or at the very least, like, took something away from it that you can use in your life. And, by the end of this movie, I mean, it's hard not to have the reaction where you're like, I feel like I have to appreciate, things.
What I have around me, yeah.
But then, like, at the end of it, I literally turned to my parents. I'm like, hey, I love you guys. Like, but
Yeah,
that's the
right.
type of reaction that like you're supposed to have for a lot of these, especially Pixar movies.
Mhm.
There's that really emotional moment at the end of Coco. And I'm not going to spoil Coco, but there's that emotional moment between him and his grandma or Nana, and again, that's another reaffirming moment of just of making sure you love the people around you, because that's
Mhm.
ultimately what's important. And it's the same thing here. I mean, what Pixar is basically trying to say is, that there's meaning in everything, around you, and you have to pay attention to it. And you're right. The movie ends on this really beautiful image of Joe walking outside, and it's an image that comes up before, and it's a leaf that falls into his hand while the sun is shining, and he
Yeah.
kind of looks around at the other people who are living their lives, and yeah, and he realizes that this is, this is his spark, this is his reason for living. So I thought that was very beautiful.
Honestly, yeah. So, going off like the way that this movie ends, what do you think happens to 22?
Yeah, that's something that I was interested in. I don't know. I'm kind of glad that they didn't go into it, but I would hope that, I guess that, she lives like a great life, I guess. The assumption is that she becomes a soul and she's born, and has a life or whatever. But
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, I felt that like they would have like finished up this movie by like Joe being able to find 21, maybe like few years like down the line, being oh hi, and she doesn't know like who he is, but I'm not sure. Like I thought like that was how this movie was gonna end, but
yeah,
it
I,
didn't. But honestly, it's pretty cool.
I'm honestly okay with it not ending that way, just because it does leave it open for interpretation. So there's some ambiguity that, that it leaves you with. So, there's that hopeful message in the end, and that idea that she, has a good life, ahead of her, which I think
True.
is nice. But yeah, I mean, how many teacups would you give this movie out of five?
I would give it 4
Yeah.
because yeah, I mean, Coco is still like 5. Like this is really good, but I do think the Spark storyline, I feel like if they had made that ending like a really solid, I would have given this a 5. But because that ending, for me at least, it doesn't like hold up through this whole movie, it's a 4, but it's still really good. So yeah.
Yeah, I would probably give it the same, around a 4 or 4.5. I don't have anything really negative to say about it, because truthfully, it just made me feel warm inside. So that's like all you really need from a Pixar movie.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, where would you rank this as far as like other Pixar movies? Because I was going back through other ones, and I think honestly, I would put this in the top 10. I don't think I'm afraid to put it in the top 10, although people might, rip me for it. But I think certainly it belongs in that category of Monsters Inc. and Toy Story and all those. But what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it belongs in the top 10. I'd say more along the lines of like the top 20. Just because
Okay.
like the top 10, that's like Monster Inc., Toy Story, Coco, like
That's like
that's fine for
masterpieces.
me.
Yeah.
But the top 20 certainly, yeah. It's a good movie. It certainly is. So
Yeah.
and it's up against.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, I mean, well acted throughout, or well voiced throughout. Great animation, a really great score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I mean, yeah, I can't really complain about much else about it.
Yeah, same. That's it for today. Join us next time on Target Tea for more reviews, and make sure to follow the Daily Targum on our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for more content.